I, 33F, was sexually assaulted by my alcoholic brother-in-law when I was 24. It happened less than 6 months since I'd moved 1.5 hours away, out of my parents' house. It took me 8 years to tell my husband, who I had been dating for 4 months when it happened. Once I told him, it started explaining a lot of weird behaviors, panic attacks when going to visit my family and night terrors being the two biggest. About a year ago, I told my parents everything that happened. My father was fairly silent. My mother tried to be understanding but couldn't help herself on comments like, "Why didn't you tell us?" and making jokes about how fucked up my childhood was when I said I had been in therapy. At the time, I explained to my parents the difficulty I was having. I told them I need their support to tell me if he's going to be around when I'm visiting. I explained to them how it has impacted me from being around as often as I would like. My dad was quiet and my mom carried on about how that shouldn't slow me down from visiting my family. Over the course of the last year, neither of my parents have even broached this topic since the day I told them. If my Bill is around at a family gathering, my dad pays attention and is right by my side if he tries to talk to me. My mom gives him alcohol when he shows up already drunk and does things like set an extra place setting at family dinners just in case he shows up. It has been hurtful and I haven't exactly felt supported by my family. My relationship with my sister has also deteriorated. Although we were never super close to begin with, she is still blissfully unaware. A few years ago, my mother announced to the family that she was officially giving me Thanksgiving to host. Since then it has been a battle and she tries to host every year. I finally put my foot down this year and said I won't come. I tried to explain to her how hurt I am and that I want to be in my own safe place. If Bill actually shows up, he usually gets sick when it involves coming to my house. I think I'll feel empowered to finally confront him. I got emotional trying to say this and my mother told me not to cry. I lost it and told her I was allowed to have emotions and she was going to listen to them even if they made her uncomfortable. She was not happy with what I had to say to her and starting swinging back with unrelated issues. I hung up on her because the conversation was going nowhere good, fast. After I got into the fight with my mom, I felt empowered to confront my Bill. We talked. He tried to say he slightly remembered what he did to me but wasn't sure because he was blackout drunk. I gave him every single detail. I also told him I'm not looking to blow up my sister's life almost a decade later, but he needs to step up and be a better husband and father and also stop drinking. The next day my mom told my sister about our fight. The main point of the fight was me not feeling supported around the who sexually assaulted me. My sister doesn't know this part, so she thinks I'm arguing about hosting Thanksgiving just because I'm difficult. I got a long, nasty text from my sister for being rude to my mother. She carried on and called me a bad aunt for not being around my nephews enough and not spending more time with my family. I'm hurt. I screenshotted the text and sent it to my Bill so he has to at least see what I'm going through because of him. So, I've been attempting to protect my sister by not telling her this secret. Ada? Should I just spill the beans and let the cards fall where they may? TLDR, Bill sexually assaulted me almost 10 years ago. Everyone except my sister knows. She's mad at me for not being around enough, but it's because of the trauma I'm still working through. Do I keep taking her shit to keep the peace or spill the beans? Update 1. Saying I'm attempting to protect my sister was the wrong word choice. I think I've been trying to protect myself from her volatility. My thinking is definitely jumbled, but thanks for helping me work through straightening it out. Reddit. Relevant comments. Why have you never told your sister? Who are you protecting in this scenario? The reason I have not told my sister is because I believe this will be a shoot the messenger situation. It is also the reason I never told her at the time. I believe my mother and sister will gang up against me. I hear what you're saying and totally understand it. I also have a lot of resentment towards my sister. He was doing heroin when they were dating and couldn't hold down a job because of stealing. When I think about it, I'm very angry at her. I think I feel guilty over the schadenfreude of potentially ruining their marriage. She may be trauma bonded. I agree she's probably trauma bonded. When I started dealing with all of this and pulled away from my family very noticeably, according to my mom, my sister thought I might be having marital issues and brought it up to my mother. My mother told me flat out that her response to my sister was that it's my life/marriage and they shouldn't get involved. So this all started with me having a breakdown and nobody in my family asking because it wasn't any of their business. I believe they are projecting. Oop defends herself against someone who says she's sending mixed messages by being fine with Bill in person and leaving Sil with a monster. I have not been fine interacting with him. I was having panic attacks since the beginning but didn't understand the reason because I thought I had repressed it successfully. It took a lot of therapy to figure out what I was upset about and what was causing the panic attacks/night terrors. I'm not fine leaving my sister and the kids in a situation like that. My sister has spent her entire life running face first into bad partners, think physical, emotional, drug abusers. She doubles down when anybody expresses any concern or tries to help her, usually making the problem substantially worse. I never want to see him again. The only time I have contacted him outside of family interaction since this happened was to confront him on Saturday and send a screenshot of my sister's nasty text. There have been no other texts. So 2 texts in the last 9 years. Nobody has accused me of being aggressive. The problem is that I haven't been able to stand up for myself, not that I'm causing a scene. I agree they're trying to go to status quo at all costs, and their gripe is the fact that I've been distancing myself. If you want to call it trauma dumping, I did that back in January when I told my parents about the assault. This most recent argument was me telling my mother that her strong-arming a holiday away from me so my assaulter can be present hurts my feelings and does not make me feel like I have her support. I proposed very clear instructions back in January and those requests have been denied. This was me reiterating those requests and calling out that they aren't being considered. Funny you say I should run to a therapist. I fired my last one for telling me I shouldn't address this situation at all. Right now I'm doing the best I can with the tools I have. I'm surprised your husband didn't handle him. When did you tell him? My husband hasn't handled him at my request. There were several insistent offers. I only told my husband 2 months before telling my parents. He was the one who helped me work through things and be able to start verbalizing what happened to me. We had several serious discussions in which he promised to support me in the ways I asked, which included not adding to the conflict. Trust me, husband is just waiting for an excuse to jump. He is upset that I won't allow him to handle it how he wants. Oop explains, in detail, what happened. TW for assault description not necessary to read. I appreciate the nuance. When this happened, it was the middle of the night and I was sound asleep. I woke up to his fingers inside of me. My gut reaction was to slap him away and curl up in a tight little ball. At some point, I fell back asleep, then woke up to his fingers inside of me a second time. I foresee my sister accusing me of lying to hurt her in some way, then going NC. I've tried broaching much less scandalous topics with her as gently as possible and she has lost her ever-loving mind on me. She has terrible, unaddressed anxiety and is very emotionally volatile. It's pretty clear I need to tear the band-aid off. I'm going to try calling my dad soon and hopefully he'll be of some help. Update 2, November 7th, same post. I've reached out to my dad and asked to talk to him without my mother around. I'm going to tell him that I'm going to tell my sister. I'm going to ask him to go to her house before I do this and take my nephews so they don't get exposed to the aftermath of the conversation. Further explanation of update 2 in comments. Thank you for saying all of this. I finally spoke to my dad. I told him I'm going to tell my sister and would appreciate his help making sure my nephews aren't around when that phone call happens. I told him the ways my mother has hurt me recently by forcing interactions and telling half-truths. His rebuttal was that it was hurtful when I hung up on my mom over the weekend. He first tried to talk me out of saying something to my sister by accusing me of being vindictive. I had to say, and repeat, that what Bill did to me is rape and that I need to share the burden I've been carrying for the last decade. That was met with silence. He then couldn't help until next week, and finally said he might be able to make things happen tonight, as my sister is currently at my parents' house. I'm waiting on a text from him for the go-ahead to call my sister. There was definitely some gaslighting during the conversation, but he's offered to help and it's the most support I've managed, minus my hubs, so I'll take what I can get. The anger monologue you wrote is amazing. Except a few stylistic word choices, that's basically my inner monologue when I think about how I truly feel. I've been reading and rereading that to keep my emotions appropriately angry. I agree with you about not having my dad do it. This is mine and I'm not going to heal unless I do it myself. Final update, November 7th, same post. Dad pulled through and gave me an opportunity to talk to my sister. She handled it way better than I expected. She acknowledged I was a victim and kept apologizing. Fleshed out final update in comments, November 8th 2023, 2 days from OG post. Absolutely no reason to apologize for your language. I talked to my sister. I asked her not to interrupt me, even if she wanted to. She respected it. She quietly listened as I told her what happened and began sobbing. The first words out of her mouth were that I will never have to see him again. He will never be welcome at mine or my parents' houses, per her. She believed me 100%. She asked questions, including if he was drunk when it happened. She acknowledged the answer didn't really matter and it was still inexcusable. This happened when we were all on a trip together visiting my grandparents. She didn't even remember going on the trip, so I walked her back to that weekend and we talked through the details. She also shared that Bill was raped by an alcoholic aunt when he was younger. I told her I called and confronted him Saturday. She asked about our conversation and I told her everything. She asked me if he admitted to remembering it and said she doesn't allow him to drink in the house anymore because he blacks out and doesn't remember what he does. I told her if ever there was a reason to be 100% sober, I thought this was a pretty damn good one. She got angry. But not at me. She went on repeat a few times that she's my big sister and her job is to protect me. I could feel her internalizing a lot of pain. Bill wound up in the hospital yesterday due to a staph infection, so she told me she wants to go home and beat the shit out of him but can't do it in the hospital, so we'll wait for him to get discharged. I explained that I do love my family, but the panic attacks and night terrors keep me away so I can protect myself. She told me she's been very angry at me for years for not being around and knowing this changes things. She said had she known, I never would have had to be around him all these years. She kept telling me she wished I had told her sooner. I told her how I always thought I'd defend myself in that type of situation but for some reason froze. I watched some videos on betrayal last night and boy, does that explain some stuff. She acknowledged that everyone handles trauma differently and it isn't my fault. We then both acknowledged that we were raised to repress any emotions that weren't positive and I had ultimately handled this situation how I had been raised, alone and internalized. She then said I was a victim, am not responsible for how I handled this trauma when it happened, and none of this was my fault. I felt hurt. She told me that she wished I had told her at the time. They didn't have any kids when this happened. She said she most likely would have divorced him. She doesn't see divorce as an option now because of the kids. I explained that I didn't have the tools in my toolbox at the time and that's what I've been working on. I told her until a year ago, I couldn't stand in an empty room and say what happened to me out loud or even write it on a piece of paper. She just sobbed. I told her I am very angry at my mother for telling half-truths and being so hurtful to me. She tried to make excuses for my mom telling her about the argument over the weekend. I told her how hurt I was at the most recent family gathering. My sister confirmed a week ahead of time that Bill was working and wouldn't be there. We walked into my parents' house and he was there, drunk. I watched my mother give him at least 3 beers and laugh and joke with him. Neither of my parents gave me a heads up he was there. My sister understood and apologized. When I brought this same topic up to my mom, she told me she didn't think it mattered or was that big of a deal. I'm really happy Bill is in the hospital. It means my sister has time to herself to straighten out her own thoughts and make some plans. She is also on a shortened WFH schedule this week. It all seems serendipitous. She was at my parents' house. I hope they are helpful and kind to her. I hope she does a lot of thinking and makes decisions that are best for her and my nephews. If talking to her made me realize anything for sure, it's that my parents are pretty fucked up units. I'm going to text my sister this morning. Considering the way she handled it, I think reaching out and trying to heal our relationship will be a good move. I also don't want my parents to do what they did to me, to her. When the dust settles some, I'm going to talk to my sister about all the unhealthy BS from my parents. I think if we can stand up to their fucked up behaviors together, everyone will be better off. I might reach out to my dad today. I'm undecided. I will definitely not be reaching out to my mother. I am going to go extremely low contact with her for the next few months, at least. I will adjust however I need to, including NC if needed. Both of my parents have some apologizing to do before they'll be allowed back in my good graces. I am happy I did everything I did yesterday without speaking a word to my mother. There's something poetic about it. My husband still very much wants to have a come to Jesus. He asked if he can cold cock Bill if he ever sees him again, or at least bitch slap him to the ground. He is also adamant that I am owed apologies from my parents individually and that they need to change their behaviors. I can't express how grateful I am to have a man like him in my life. He told me he'd do this 100 times if it was what I needed. I know this is just the start in a lot of ways. Yesterday was like getting to the peak of Mount Everest. I still have to get down the mountain, but the worst of it is over. How Oop is doing now. Thank you for the virtual mom hug. I've blown the bubble up and my entire family isn't speaking to me. They're treating me as though I'm the one who did something wrong and owes an apology. But I already feel lighter. It hurts but I think I'm seeing things more clearly than I ever have. I have an insanely supportive husband and my mill has been momming pretty hard. Plus an appointment with a psychologist early next week. Mini update from today when Oop posted in her comments. Sister has turned on you too? We haven't spoken since I told her 8 days ago. So it's been almost radio silence from the entire nuclear family since. My dad texted yesterday asking if I was coming for Thanksgiving now. Fuck no. I'm so sorry. Thank you. I texted with my dad and he said she is doing better. I've texted my sister twice now with no response. I'm thankful for some really solid people in my life who are showering me with love and support right now. I'm going to get my confidence back, hold my head up high, and move forward in the way I know I was raised, even if my folks are being hypocritical. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My ex cheated on me with my childhood best friend. So, here's my story, about how I lost the love of my life, C, and my best friend, J, all in one day. It all started when I met C in grade 5 and I had a crush on her for years, never gaining the talk to her or anything as I was just figuring out these feelings. Plus I knew I was an introvert from the beginning, barely having any real friends besides a small group of 4, one of them being my best friend J. We did everything a kid could do together, go camping, something I didn't like but was fun with him, play video games, board games, sleepovers, all those things, and thought of him as a brother. It was he who had the courage to add her to put friend group. We grew closer as we got older. It was only in grade 9 that me and C were starting to get closer as friends. During high school, when we were both in grade 10, I finally gained the courage to ask C out, and to me surprise and happiness, she said yes. Our first date was amazing as I took her out to her favorite restaurant, which wasn't really expensive but did have a big bill. Then we went skating as she has always loved that, and that was one of the best memories I've ever had. Over next 4 years, we had the best relationship, or at least what I thought was the best. It was only during year 3 of our relationship that C wanted to go the next level, and so did I, but I was just so nervous about it that I never realized what was happening between my GF and BF until it was too late. I was also stressed from the SOTs that I didn't have enough time to spend with her either. It all came to a screeching halt when I not only passed my SATs, my nervous about having sex went away with the letter, and I walked to her apartment to tell her the great news. I entered the elevator to go to her floor and walked to her door when I noticed it was open slightly, and so in a panic, I opened the door myself, not thinking straight and thinking she was in trouble, but found nothing. I walked around the apartment, but eventually I noticed the trail of clothes leading up to her bedroom door. If those weren't obvious, then the moans and screams of pleasure were. That was until I noticed a jacket on the ground, the very same one I gave Jay on his 18th birthday. I saw only red when I thought that and barged into her room, where they were both shocked at my interruption, but C soon screamed in terror as I pulled Jay off of her and started beating him. I was never a violent person growing up, but this rage and betrayal turned me into someone I hope I could never be again. It's been 2 weeks since I caught Jay and C together, and I have been ignoring every message they sent me, every call and voicemail they made, and have even ignored their family's attempts at getting me to speak to them. I couldn't stand to be in the same room with them anymore. Every time I think of them, I just remember that day when I caught them. Hope you guys have any advice about what I should do next with them, cause I don't. Update. So, here's my update on my situation. Sorry this took a bit, but I decided to just look at the future for myself now after everything that's happened. So, onto the update. As many of you pointed out, I had to get the truth about our breakup before the two of them vilify me. To my and possibly your surprise, they didn't say anything about me, but they also didn't out themselves. The two of them kept quiet about the whole thing, and I couldn't stand that. Watching as if nothing happened between the three of us. So, I contacted as many of our mutual friends as I could to tell them. Some believed me, others thought I was in the wrong, and a few were indifferent, but all looked at Jay and C differently after that day, as I had many details of what they did while those poseffed. After I outed the two of them, I realized I needed to get away from the city. I lived here my whole life, but I had to get away. I just couldn't stand being close to C and Jay anymore. I was simply getting boxes of my stuff ready to move when I could, and I hear a knock at the door, and wouldn't you know, C was standing right outside. Her eyes just bloodshot and looks like she hasn't slept in days. I barely opened it for her anyways, so I just rudely asked, "What are you doing here?" Cause I'm not about to be gracious towards her, and never will again. She asked to be let in, to talk for a minute, and I decided to do so, but not to take her back, to just hear the excuses I know she'll come up with. She started to cry, asking for forgiveness, and wanted to explain why she did what she did. I kept a straight face and didn't say a word while she was speaking. She told me how she felt neglected cause of the lack of sex between us, which I guess is true. She went on to say that Jay comforted her, and slowly began to follow him as the days went on, and one thing led to another, and I had caught them soon after they became physical. After she was done, I told her that if she fell for Jay, all she had to tell me was that she wanted to break up, and I would have accepted them getting together afterwards, but they didn't do so. Instead, I saw my first love in bed with my best friend. I told her I was moving away after this, that I couldn't stand being in the city anymore with C and Jay or their family, but I didn't tell her where, cause I don't want her to follow me. I saw the tears flowing even faster as she heard that. Guess she thought that we could reconcile after what happened. Well, sorry C, but I got other plans than take you back. After that, I just held onto her hand. She gained a hopeful look in her eyes and led her to the door, before pushing her out. She turned towards me, pure sadness in her eyes. "I'll never love you again. Go back to Jay, I'm sure he'll be happy to accept you fully, after all, he already did so." I slammed the door in her face after that, and heard her crying outside, but didn't care and just continued to relax and pack my stuff. As for Jay, well, never bothered with him again, didn't speak to him, didn't respond to any of his messages, nothing. I'm done with him, and nothing will change that. So, that's my update, nothing too big, but hey, don't really care right now to make this my whole life story. So, goodbye and have a nice day.